Welcome to Terrormouth, where the night doesn't just hold secrets, it remembers them. Story 1, the night the town stopped dreaming, the town of Alder Hollow. Montana wasn't famous for anything. No landmarks, no legends. Tourists cared about no crimes that ever made national news. It was the kind of place people forgot even existed, a scattering of homes tucked between pine-covered hills. Population barely over 100, with a single two-lane road passing through like an afterthought. People there lived quiet lives. They locked their doors out of habit, not fear. Children rode bikes past sunset. Porch lights stayed off because nothing ever happened, until the night everyone woke up at the same time. It was February 17th, 2013, according to every resident who later gave a statement. They all opened their eyes at 2:11 a.m. exactly. Not because of a sound, not because of a dream, not because of an emergency. They just woke up at first. Most of them lay there in the dark, confused, assuming it was coincidence. But within seconds, something else became clear. The town was completely silent. No wind, no insects, no distant highway noise. Even in rural Montana, that kind of silence doesn't happen. Then came the second realization. They couldn't go back to sleep, no matter how hard they tried. No one in Alder Hollow was able to close their eyes again. It wasn't insomnia. It wasn't restlessness. It was as if sleep itself had been removed, like a switch had been flipped somewhere. Beyond reach, some residents tried praying. Others turned on televisions. A few stepped outside, thinking the fresh air might help. That was when they saw the lights. Every house in town, every single one, was illuminated from the inside. Bedroom lights, kitchen lights, basement lights, even homes belonging to elderly residents who never stayed up late. From the hill overlooking Alder Hollow, it looked like the town had been gently lifted out of the darkness and placed under a glass dome by 2:30 a.m. People began calling each other, not panicked, not screaming, just confused. Are you awake? Did something wake you? Can you sleep? The answers were always the same. No, 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 no. At 3:04 a.m., the power went out. Every light died at once, and that was when the sounds began. Not screams, not footsteps, breathing, low, slow breathing, as if something massive was inhaling and exhaling just beneath the town itself. The ground didn't shake, but the sensation traveled through walls, through floors, through bone. Several residents reported the same impossible feeling, the sense that Alder Hollow was no longer on the land, but inside something. Panic spread for the first time. People gathered outside despite the cold, drawn to the center of town where the old water tower stood. They didn't plan it, they just moved, like animals responding to pressure they didn't understand. More than 60 people stood together under the tower, shivering in the dark. And then, all at once, the breathing stopped in its place. Came a sound that no one could explain properly. Afterward, it wasn't a voice. It wasn't mechanical. It was closer to the sound you hear when a crowd whispers in a theater before the lights go down, layered, overlapping, expectant. And it was coming from every direction at once. One man, a schoolteacher named Daniel Crane, shouted, asking if anyone else could hear it. Before anyone could answer, the whispering stopped. Absolute silence returned. Then, somewhere behind them, a woman began to speak. She wasn't screaming, she wasn't crying, she was calmly describing a dream. A dream none of them remembered having. She spoke about standing in a place with no sky, about watching something enormous move slowly above her, about realizing in the dream that she wasn't supposed to wake up yet. As she spoke, people began to recognize details, not similar details, exact ones. When she finished, another person started talking, then another dot, each describing the same dream from different angles, different perspectives, as if they had all been there together. By sunrise, Alder Hollow looked normal again. Birds returned, wind moved through the trees, the road hummed with distant traffic, but no one in town had slept, not even for a second. Doctors found nothing wrong. Brain scans were clean. No toxins, no gas leaks, no explanation. But the effects didn't fade. Days passed, then weeks. People grew erratic. Hallucinations began. Residents reported seeing figures standing at the edge of their vision, tall, unmoving, watching. By the end of the month, 5 people had left town and never returned. By summer, Alder Hollow's population had dropped by half, and every single person who stayed reported the same terrifying truth. They could still feel it, waiting, because whatever had passed through Alder Hollow that night didn't take their sleep by accident, it had only interrupted it. Asterisk. No one in Alder Hollow ever slept again. At first, the town tried to pretend it was temporary. People rested their eyes. They lay down at night. They followed routines meant to trick the body. Doctors from Billings prescribed sedatives so strong they would have dropped a horse. The drugs did nothing. Eyes closed. Minds awake, fully conscious, endlessly alert, trapped behind blinking eyelids while time crawled forward without mercy. Within 3 months, the human cost became impossible to ignore. People began losing track of days. Conversations repeated, memories blurred, not from exhaustion, but from overexposure. The mind, never allowed to shut down, started erasing itself to cope. That's when the second phenomenon began. Dreams started leaking into waking life. Residents reported seeing places that didn't exist, long corridors without walls, fields under a sky that pulsed instead of moved. These weren't hallucinations in the usual sense. Multiple people described the same locations independently, down to identical cracks in the ground and the same distant shape moving far above, always above, the town doctor. Dr. Helen Morris was the first to connect the details. She collected handwritten accounts, recording times, symbols, recurring phrases. The patterns were undeniable. Everyone wasn't just sharing dreams, they were remembering the same place, and slowly, they realized something far worse. They were remembering it wrong. The dreams they recalled weren't original experiences. They were fragments, pieces of something that had already happened long ago, something enormous and unfinished. At night, people began hearing the breathing again, not beneath the ground this time, above the houses, slow, vast inhalations that caused pressure in the ears, and a feeling of weight pressing down from the sky. Dogs went feral. Livestock refused to stand. Birds abandoned the area entirely. One night in October, the water tower collapsed. No explosion, no rust failure, just a sudden inward crushing, as if something had gently but firmly pressed it down from above. That same night, Daniel Crane disappeared. His car was found parked perfectly in his driveway, keys on the seat, engine cold. The front door of his house was open. Inside, every surface was covered in handwritten sentences, the same sentence, written thousands of times in different handwriting styles, as if copied through trembling hands. It knows we're awake now. 3 days later, Daniel came back. He walked into town at sunrise, barefoot, clothes torn, eyes wide but unfocused. He didn't recognize anyone. He didn't respond to his name. He just stood in the center of Alder Hollow and stared upward. When Dr. Morris approached him, he finally spoke. He said he had finished the dream. He said the thing above them wasn't. Watching it was counting counting breaths, counting heartbeats, counting how long something could stay awake before it collapsed back into unconsciousness. The town wasn't chosen because it was special. It was chosen because it was quiet, because nothing would interrupt the process, because no one would notice when the dreaming thing beneath reality briefly stirred, mistook human minds for its own fragments, and tried to pull itself fully awake using borrowed consciousness. Daniel died that afternoon. His heart simply stopped. No struggle, no warning. An autopsy showed signs consistent with extreme sleep deprivation, except he had never slept in the first place. After his death, something changed. People started losing time. Hours vanished. Then days they would come to standing in places they didn't remember walking to, holding objects they didn't own, speaking words they didn't remember learning. The town began thinning faster. Some residents fled and never stopped driving. Others locked themselves inside and waited. On December 2nd, the final event occurred at 2:11 a.m. Exactly 10 months after the first awakening. Every remaining resident felt the same sensation at once: relief. For the first time since February, their minds softened. Thoughts slowed. The pressure lifted. They were falling asleep, and as consciousness faded, they understood the truth too late. They hadn't been kept awake. They had been held awake so they wouldn't dream, because dreaming was how it reached through, because sleep was the door dot when Alder Hollow was found 3 days later. The town was intact. No signs of struggle, no body, no blood, just empty houses, beds neatly made, and in every bedroom, a single detail that investigators could never explain. Pillows, indented, as if someone had just lifted their head. To this day, Alder Hollow is uninhabited. Satellite images occasionally show lights inside the buildings at night, even though there's no power, no wiring, no residents, and sometimes hikers passing through the area report the same strange sensation just before dawn. The feeling that if they close their eyes, something else might finally open its own. Story 2.
The Vanishing Bridge of Maple Creek, Iowa.
Had always been small. Smaller than small, really. A cluster of houses along a winding river, a single gas station, a diner that never closed, and a bridge that the locals called Old Iron. The bridge wasn't remarkable in any conventional way. Rusting steel beams, wood planks warped by decades of snow and rain, the occasional warning sign. But for generations, the people of Maple Creek knew one thing: never cross Old Iron after midnight. No one could explain why. The stories were scattered, fragmentary, dismissed as superstition. A missing boy here, a couple vanishing there, car lights spotted speeding across the bridge, then nothing. Yet somehow the bridge remained, the river flowed, and life went on. It was July 8th, 2017, when 30-year-old Emma Harper, new in town, arrived for the first time. She had moved from Des Moines to escape her hectic life and start over, drawn by the town's simplicity and charm. Emma didn't know about the bridge. That night, after working late at the diner, she decided to take a shortcut home. Her car headlights swept over the familiar outline of the river before landing on Old Iron. She laughed at herself for not realizing sooner how narrow it was. A few minutes over it couldn't hurt. She drove onto the bridge. At first, everything seemed normal. The boards creaked under her tires. The river shimmered under the moonlight. Then, halfway across, her headlights flickered. A chill crawled up her spine. The night grew unnaturally still. That's when she saw it, or rather, them. Figures, tall and thin, standing perfectly still along the length of the bridge. Partially transparent, but unmistakably human. Their eyes, black voids, stared directly at her. Her car shuddered, tires locking briefly on the warped wood. The engine coughed, then roared again. Emma slammed her foot on the gas. The figures didn't move. They didn't blink. And then the bridge beneath her seemed to stretch, lengthening impossibly, planks snapping into place, as if reality itself was bending. She screamed, and the bridge disappeared. Not just the bridge, the river, the trees, the night sky. Only her car remained, suspended in darkness. The headlights illuminated nothing but void, yet she could feel movement around her. Whispers, low and echoing, like hundreds of voices speaking at once, brushing against her ears, but saying nothing she could comprehend. Minutes or hours passed, she couldn't tell. The car moved on its own, carrying her along the bridge that no longer existed in any recognizable way. Then came a single whisper, distinct among the rest. "You're not supposed to leave." Emma's vision shifted. She was no longer driving, though her hands gripped the wheel. The road ahead was infinite, folding in on itself. Shadows flickered at impossible angles. And from the darkness, the bridge itself began to take a form. A bridge made entirely of reflections. Not wood, not steel, but glassy, black water reflecting things she didn't understand, other people. Other times, other places. Her car stopped abruptly. Her pulse thundered. And at that moment, Emma saw the first vanished ones. Faces pressed against the reflection, mouths open in silent screams, eyes pleading. She recognized some of them vaguely, maybe from old news stories she had read, maybe just fragments of memory. She didn't care. She wanted to scream, to run, to wake up, and then she did. Her car was back on Old Iron, the moonlight bathing the bridge as if nothing had happened. Nothing. No figures. No whispers. No infinite black reflections. Only the gentle creak beneath, the familiar sounds of insects, and the soft hum of her engine. Emma convinced herself it was a hallucination, a combination of fatigue, stress, and the eeriness of the town's quiet night. But when she glanced at the rearview mirror, a single thing froze her blood. The faint reflection of a woman standing behind her in the back seat, eyes black as midnight, lips moving without sound. The next morning, Emma drove into town to share her story. She found the diner bustling, neighbors chatting, and the bridge perfectly normal. No missing persons, no void, no whispers. Yet when she returned home that night, she found her apartment window open, the curtains swaying gently, and etched into the condensation of the glass, words she had never written. "You saw us. We saw you. You belong now." Emma couldn't sleep. Not a wink. Every time her eyes closed, she saw the bridge, not as it appeared in reality, but as it truly was, infinite, black, folding in on itself. Populated with faces pressed against the reflective surface, mouths opening in silent screams. She could feel them reaching, pulling, wanting her to join them by morning. She tried to convince herself it had been a hallucination. Yet, every reflection in her apartment, mirrors, windows, even the surface of her coffee held subtle distortions. Shadows moved unnaturally, and sometimes she thought she saw a figure standing just behind her, disappearing when she turned. That evening, she decided she couldn't ignore it. She had to know the truth about Old Iron. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of grim determination, she drove toward the bridge. The town was quiet. Too quiet. Not a single light burned in the diner, not a car on the road. Only the faint mist over the creek, glowing faintly in the headlights as she approached the bridge. Emma noticed something new. The air shimmered like heat rising from asphalt in the summer. The planks beneath her tires seemed to bend and twist unnaturally. The river no longer reflected the moonlight. Instead, it mirrored the infinite black surface from her dreams. The figures were waiting. Hundreds, maybe thousands, along the bridge. Their faces pale, eyes hollow, limbs elongated, moving with a jerky, unnatural rhythm. As she drove, they didn't scatter. They didn't react to the engine's roar. They only stared, whispering in the language of the void. Emma's instincts screamed to stop, to flee, but her hands gripped the wheel as if possessed. The car moved forward on its own, carrying her into the heart of the bridge. She realized, in a sudden, horrifying flash, what the townspeople meant. The bridge doesn't let you leave. Time lost all meaning. She saw fragments of others, people she recognized from old missing persons reports. Some from decades ago, walking, standing, floating across the reflective surface, their eyes wide with terror. And then she realized they were still conscious, still aware, forever trapped. A whisper slithered through her mind. You cannot wake. You cannot escape. You belong to the bridge now. Emma's scream tore through the void, but no sound emerged. The bridge itself seemed to pulse with life, as if breathing, each plank stretching, contracting, unfolding reality like paper. Suddenly, a hand reached through the reflection. Not solid, not tangible, yet her mind recoiled at the sensation, cold, sharp, and suffocating. She realized the bridge didn't kill. It didn't need to. It claimed, devouring consciousness, folding it into its infinite surface. Adding another face to its collection, her car halted at the center. The black reflective surface rippled beneath her, distorting her own reflection. And she saw herself, pale, eyes wide, mouth opening in a silent scream, trapped forever in that mirrored nightmare. She tried to force her hands off the wheel. She tried to close her eyes. But the bridge had already taken her mind. Her body still moved, an empty vessel, a puppet for something that fed on awareness. Hours, maybe years passed. Time was meaningless. Only the whispers and the black reflections existed. And then, in a moment she could neither measure nor recall, she understood the truth. Old Iron didn't just vanish, people. It wasn't a bridge. It was a conscious entity, ancient and patient, feeding on human minds one at a time, keeping them awake, bending reality, unfolding their memories into its infinite reflective surface. It had claimed generations in Maple Creek, silently, And now Emma was part of it. Another pair of hollow eyes pressed against the black glass, silently begging, silently waiting for the next person to cross. Years later, travelers still report strange lights on the bridge. They describe faces in the reflections, whispering words they cannot understand. And locals, if asked, simply shake their heads. Never cross Old Iron after midnight. Never look too long. It watches. Emma's car is sometimes seen parked perfectly at the bridge's edge, engine off, headlights flickering. The door occasionally creaks open by itself, and in the faintest hint of condensation on the windshield, a single message appears, written as if by invisible fingers. We are waiting. You belong now. The bridge still stands. The town remains quiet, and every so often, someone new disappears, crossing Old Iron into the infinite black reflections, never to be seen again. Story 3 *. The lights of Whispering Hollow. Whispering Hollow, West Virginia, was barely a dot on the map. A scattering of houses along narrow, winding roads, surrounded by dense woods that locals said swallowed sound. The town had one gas station, a church, and a small general store, but its true claim to fame was the strange, unexplainable phenomenon that appeared almost every year, the lights of Whispering Hollow. The first reports were always similar. Late at night, travelers or locals would see glowing orbs hovering in the tree line along the back roads. They moved erratically, darting between trees, disappearing and reappearing, sometimes following cars for miles. Phones didn't capture them clearly. Cameras showed nothing but flickering distortions, and those who stared too long reported hearing whispers, faint, almost hypnotic, but in no language anyone could understand. It was October 14th, 2019, when college student Marcus Fields decided to investigate. Marcus had grown up fascinated by local legends and was determined to document the phenomenon for a research project. Driving his old pickup down the winding dirt roads of Whispering Hollow, he ignored warnings from locals who said things don't like to be watched. As night fell, the mist rolled in thick from the surrounding forest. Marcus's headlights barely penetrated the fog. Then he saw them, lights floating just above the ground, shifting colors from pale blue to deep amber. They moved as if alive, circling trees, sometimes forming shapes too precise to be natural. Marcus stopped the truck, heart hammering. The lights seemed to react to him, approaching cautiously, then retreating. He grabbed his camera, but as soon as he lifted it, the lights surged toward him, and the air grew colder. That's when he heard it. The whispers. At first they were barely audible, like wind rustling through dead leaves. Then they grew louder, forming phrases that made no sense, yet filled him with an indescribable dread. The lights began to swarm closer, dancing around the truck, reflecting off the metal in impossible ways. Marcus's rational mind screamed to leave, but his curiosity held him. He stepped out of the truck, camera in hand. The lights paused, hovering inches above the ground, then began to form a shape, tall, humanoid, almost perfectly human in outline but flickering, like a broken hologram. And then the whispers spoke directly in his mind. You shouldn't be here. You can't leave. Panic surged. He ran back to his truck, but the lights moved faster than he thought possible, surrounding the vehicle. The engine wouldn't start. The fog thickened, muting all sound except the whispers that now felt like hundreds of voices. Pressing against his skull, Marcus tried to call for help. His phone screen glitched, showing not the usual interface, but distorted. Static-filled images, fleeting glimpses of faces he didn't recognize. Screaming, eyes hollow, and behind them, the lights moving in impossible ways. Hours seemed to pass, or minutes. Time became meaningless. The forest twisted in on itself, trees bending at angles that defied geometry. And then Marcus noticed the orbs forming a path leading deep into the woods. Something intelligence, perhaps even malice, guided them. Against all instinct, he followed. Every step he took felt heavier, like walking underwater. The whispers intensified, alternating between pleading and mocking tones. Shapes flickered in the fog, shadows that weren't quite shadows, bodies that weren't fully formed. He tried to turn back, but the road had vanished. The only visible path was that guided by the lights. Finally, he reached a clearing. The lights converged, forming a massive, pulsating orb hovering above a mound of roots and rocks. It radiated a blackness that seemed to absorb light itself. The whispers became a roar. And then, Marcus felt himself pulled forward, not physically, but in mind. A sensation of being unmade, of consciousness being separated from reality. He tried to scream, but no sound came. His body froze. His vision blurred, and in that moment, he realized the truth. The lights weren't natural. They weren't energy, fireflies, or electronics. They were sentient, watching, choosing, collecting. Then everything went dark. Marcus awoke in the clearing, but nothing felt real. The world around him had shifted. Trees towered impossibly high, their trunks twisting like molten metal. The fog had thickened into an almost liquid form, swallowing sound and light. Above him, the massive pulsating orb hovered, emanating a darkness so profound it made the very air vibrate. He tried to move, but his body no longer obeyed. It was as if the forest had claimed him, tethered his limbs to the ground. And then the whispers returned, louder, insistent, filling his mind with impossible visions. He saw himself not as he was, but fragmented, scattered across countless reflections of the woods, each version trapped in its own loop of fear. The light swirled faster, forming patterns that defied human comprehension. Some took the shape of animals, others of people long missing from the town's history, their faces twisted in silent screams. And then he noticed the eyes, hundreds of hollow eyes in the orb, watching, judging, feeding. They were alive. They knew. Marcus understood. The lights weren't just hunting him. They were learning from him, studying his fears, manipulating his perceptions. Every instinct, every memory, every ounce of courage was being catalogued, folded into the orb's growing consciousness, summoning every bit of willpower. He screamed a soundless, guttural scream that echoed in his mind. The orb pulsed violently, and the lights scattered briefly, revealing glimpses of the ground beneath, hundreds of footprints that weren't there moments ago. Human and animal, leading in every direction, yet never away. The forest itself seemed to shift, forming a labyrinth that could not be escaped. Time became meaningless. Marcus could feel himself fraying, strands of his mind pulled into the pulsating orb. Shadows flickered at the edge of his vision, whispering in voices that were both familiar and alien. They repeated his own thoughts, his fears, his regrets, twisting them into a chant that made his head throb. Then, a figure appeared within the orb, a man Marcus recognized from old missing person reports, decades gone. He reached out to Marcus, mouth moving, but the words were swallowed by the dark energy surrounding him. The figure's eyes conveyed a silent warning. You cannot fight it. You cannot leave." The orb contracted suddenly, a suction that pulled Marcus forward. He felt himself dissolving, his consciousness slipping into the living blackness. Memories, emotions, and even time itself bent into the orb. He was aware, yet powerless, trapped in a liminal space between reality and nightmare. Somewhere deep inside, Marcus realized the horrifying truth. The lights of Whispering Hollow were sentient collectors, entities older than the town, feeding not on flesh, but on awareness. Each person they trapped became part of the consciousness, another voice in the whispers. Another pair of hollow eyes pressed against the fog. He screamed one last time, feeling himself absorbed, his identity folding into the endless black. The lights pulsed rhythmically, almost contently, before scattering back into the forest, resuming their eerie, floating dance along the roads the next morning. Locals would drive past the same clearing and see nothing. The forest seemed normal. The fog dissipated. No signs of Marcus remained, except for the faint glimmer of orbs in the mist if you stared long enough, and a whisper that no one else could hear. "We are waiting, always." The lights of Whispering Hollow would appear again, as they had for generations, hunting the curious, the brave, and the unwary, folding them into their consciousness, continuing their silent collection. Marcus was no longer a person. He was part of the lights. Another whisper among the countless others. Another trapped mind guiding the next victim to their fate. And somewhere, deep in the forest, the orb pulsed, knowing, aware, eternal. Story for the Vanishing Hitchhiker of Crimson Road was never meant to be driven after dark. That was the first thing locals warned outsiders about. It wasn't written on signs or listed on GPS warnings. But every diner conversation, every gas station pause, every half-serious laugh carried the same unspoken rule. Don't take Crimson Road at night. The road cut through a forgotten stretch of northern Maine, threading between dense pine forests that blocked moonlight and swallowed sound. During the day, it looked harmless, just cracked asphalt, leaning telephone poles, and rusted mile markers. But after sunset, the forest closed in, and the road felt narrower, longer, almost alive. Disappearances along Crimson Road went back to the 1950s. Hitchhikers, delivery drivers, couples taking shortcuts. Some cars were found abandoned with engines still warm. Others were never found at all. Police reports always ended the same way. No evidence. Case unresolved. And always, witnesses mentioned the same thing. A girl on the side of the road on November 2nd, 2020. Olivia Hayes had never heard those stories. She was a high school English teacher. 32 years old, practical, rational, and exhausted. The parent-teacher conference had run late, stretching past 10 p.m., and freezing rain had started falling by the time she left the school parking lot. Her phone battery was low, her coffee long gone, and all she wanted was to get home. Her GPS rerouted her through Crimson Road to save 12 minutes the moment she turned onto it. She felt it, a sudden pressure in her chest, like the air had thickened. The forest rose on both sides, tall pines packed so tightly their branches formed a black ceiling overhead. Fog rolled low across the asphalt, crawling like something alive. The radio crackled. Olivia frowned and adjusted the dial. Static. Then a faint voice, distorted, whispering before cutting out completely. She turned it off, telling herself it was just bad reception. 10 minutes passed, no houses, no streetlights, No other cars. Then she saw her. A figure stood on the right shoulder of the road, barely visible through the fog. A young woman, still motionless, one arm raised, thumb out. Olivia's foot hovered over the brake. The girl wore an old-fashioned dress, pale blue, knee-length, soaked through. Her dark hair clung to her face and neck, dripping water onto the road. She didn't wave. She didn't move. She just stood there, waiting. Every instinct screamed, "Don't stop." But Olivia did. She pulled over, heart pounding, and cracked the passenger window. Cold air flooded in, sharp and metallic. "Are you okay?" Olivia asked. The girl turned slowly. Her face was pale, unnaturally pale, and her eyes were wide, glassy, reflecting the headlights like mirrors. When she spoke, her voice was barely louder than the rain. "Please," she said. "I need a ride." Something about her felt wrong. Not aggressive, not threatening, just empty, like she wasn't fully there. "Where are you headed?" Olivia asked. The girl hesitated. Then, softly, "Home." Against her better judgment, Olivia unlocked the doors. The girl opened the passenger door and climbed in. The smell of wet earth and cold filled the car instantly. Water dripped from her clothes onto the floor mat. But Olivia noticed something strange. The droplets didn't spread. They vanished the moment they hit the carpet. "Seatbelt," Olivia said automatically. The girl didn't respond. Olivia pulled back onto the road. They drove in silence. The fog thickened, pressing against the windshield like breath on glass. Olivia glanced sideways. The girl sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. "Do you live nearby?" Olivia tried again. The girl's lips moved, but no sound came out. Then Olivia heard the words anyway, not through her ears, but somewhere deeper, like a thought that wasn't hers. "Just drive." A chill ran through her spine. The road began to feel wrong. The same curve appeared again and again. The same broken reflector post. The same leaning pine tree shaped like a claw. Olivia checked her speedometer. 45 miles per hour. It felt slower, heavy, like the car was pushing through. Resistance. She glanced into the rearview mirror. For a split second, she saw movement in the woods, tall, thin shapes standing just beyond the tree line. Too still to be animals, too many to be people. She blinked. They were gone. "Is someone meeting you?" Olivia asked, her voice shaking now. The girl slowly turned her head. Her eyes reflected something that wasn't in the car. Long shadows, writhing shapes. When she spoke, her mouth barely moved. They'd been waiting a long time. The temperature inside the car dropped sharply. Olivia could see her breath now, fogging the air between them. The dashboard lights flickered. "No," Olivia whispered. "No, this isn't happening." The headlights flashed. For a moment the fog lifted, and Olivia saw the forest clearly. There were figures everywhere, dozens of them, standing between the trees. Tall, stretched, their limbs too long, their faces pale blurs without features. They weren't moving, they were watching. The engine sputtered. "Please," Olivia said, gripping the steering wheel. "Tell me where to stop." The girl leaned closer. Her skin looked wrong up close. Not skin at all, but something thin, stretched over darkness. Her eyes began to darken, swallowing the whites. "You shouldn't have stopped," she whispered. The engine died. Total darkness. The headlights went out. The dashboard went black. Silence swallowed the road. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate. circling the car, shapes pressed against the fogged windows, leaving streaks of darkness behind. Fingers too many joints. Too long traced the glass. The girl placed her hand on Olivia's arm. It was ice cold. The road outside began to dissolve. Asphalt peeling away into endless black space filled with faintly glowing eyes. The girl smiled, her mouth opened, wider than it should have, and Olivia finally understood Crimson Road didn't take people. It fed the darkness outside. The car wasn't natural. It wasn't night. It wasn't fog. It was something thicker, like the absence of reality itself, pressing against the glass from every direction. Olivia could no longer see the trees, the road, or the sky. Just blackness filled with faint, shifting shapes. As if something massive was breathing beyond the windshield. The footsteps stopped. Silence followed, deep, absolute, suffocating. Then the girl spoke again. "They can smell fear," she whispered, her breath frosting the air. "It makes them closer." Olivia yanked her arm away and fumbled for the door handle. It wouldn't budge. The locks clicked uselessly. She tried the ignition. Nothing. The engine was dead, but the car felt awake, vibrating faintly beneath her, like a trapped animal. "What are you?" Olivia demanded, tears streaming down her face. The girl turned slowly, up close. The illusion finally collapsed. Her eyes were no longer eyes, they were holes. Deep and endless, swallowing the dashboard light that shouldn't have existed anymore. Her skin rippled, as if something underneath it was shifting, struggling to stay contained. The pale blue dress darkened, bleeding into shadow, threads unraveling into smoke. "I was like you once," the girl said. I stopped. Memories flooded Olivia's mind, not hers, but the girl's. A different winter. Decades earlier, a young woman stranded on Crimson Road after her car slid into a ditch, cold and alone in despondency. She waved for help, just as Olivia had seen her. A passing truck slowed. It never reached the end of the road. "They offered me a choice," the girl continued. "Walk into the dark, or bring them someone else." Olivia shook her head violently. No, that's not real. This is shock. I'm hallucinating." The girl smiled, a broken, hollow expression filled with grief. I said the same thing. A thunderous creak echoed around the car. Something massive leaned close to the roof, pressing down. The metal groaned. The windows bowed inward, spiderweb cracks racing across the glass. Shapes emerged, tall, impossibly thin beings with elongated limbs and faces stretched smooth, like wax melted over bone. They had no mouths, but Olivia could hear them screaming inside her skull. The girl reached out again, her fingers trembling. "If they take you fully, you don't disappear. You stay, you stand on the road, and you wait." The realization crushed Olivia's chest. "That's why people vanish," she whispered. "You don't kill them." The girl nodded slowly. "We keep them." The pressure on the car increased. The roof dented inward with a violent snap. The windshield shattered outward, not breaking, but pulling apart, dragged by unseen force. Cold wind howled through the cabin, carrying whispers layered over screams, layered over sobbing. The figures reached inside. Hands closed around Olivia's legs, her shoulders, her throat. Their touch burned and froze at the same time, leaving numbness spreading through her body. "No," Olivia screamed. "I won't become you." The girl hesitated. For the first time, something like fear crossed her face. "They're hungry," she said quietly. "If you fight, they'll tear you apart. If you accept it, it hurts less." Olivia locked eyes with her. "You still feel it, don't you?" Olivia said, "That's why you warn people. That's why you hesitate." The girl's expression cracked. "I remember my name," she whispered. "That's all I have left." The figures shrieked, a soundless vibration that shook the road itself. The girl made a decision. She grabbed Olivia's wrist and pressed something cold into her palm. A rusted key, etched with symbols that pulsed faintly with light. "Drive," she said. "When the road opens, don't look back." "What about you?" Olivia cried. The girl stepped back. "For one night," she said, voice trembling, "I can choose again." She turned toward the figures. They recoiled, not in fear, but in shock. The girl screamed, a real scream this time, and ran into the darkness, drawing them with her. The pressure vanished instantly. The car dropped hard onto asphalt. The headlights snapped back on. The engine roared to life. Olivia didn't hesitate. She slammed the accelerator. The road twisted violently, bending in impossible ways. Trees blurred past. The fog thinned. The screams faded, replaced by silence and the sound of tires gripping pavement. Then, suddenly, Crimson Road ended. Streetlights appeared, houses, a gas station. Olivia skidded to a stop, sobbing uncontrollably. It was over, or so she thought. The police never found evidence of anything unusual. No damaged road, no forest disturbances, no missing hitchhiker reports matching Olivia's description. But Crimson Road was closed the following spring after multiple drivers reported someone standing at the edge of the trees. Olivia quit teaching and moved away. Never drives at night anymore. And sometimes, just before sleep, she feels something cold in her hand, the rusted key, still warm, still humming. And on certain nights, when the fog rolls in heavy and low, people swear they see two figures standing on Crimson Road now. One in a pale blue dress, and one that looks very much like a woman who once stopped to help. Crimson Road is still hungry, and it remembers kindness. Story 5. The town that wouldn't let anyone leave. No one remembers exactly when the road signs changed. People in Briar Hollow always said it happened gradually, like rust spreading under paint. One week, the wooden sign at the edge of town still pointed east toward the highway. A month later, the arrow was gone. Not broken, not stolen, just missing, as if it had never existed. Briar Hollow sat deep in the Appalachian foothills, a town so small it barely appeared on maps. One gas station, one diner, a post office that only opened 3 days a week. The kind of place where everyone knew your name and noticed when you tried to leave. That was the first rule people didn't talk about. You could enter Briar Hollow any time you wanted, but leaving was different. Evan Mercer arrived on a Tuesday evening, low on fuel and patience. He was driving cross-country for contract work, relying on outdated GPS and instinct. When his phone lost signal, the road narrowed, the trees thickened, and dusk fell faster than it should have. The gas station appeared suddenly, its fluorescent lights buzzing like insects trapped in glass. Inside, the air smelled old oil, mildew, and something faintly metallic. A man stood behind the counter, thin and grey-haired, eyes too alert for someone his age. "Evening," the man said, "Passing through." Evan nodded. "Just need gas." Then I'm back on the highway. The man hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, long enough for Evan to notice. Highways. Tricky after dark, he said carefully. You might want to stay the night. Evan smiled politely. I'll take my chances. The man didn't argue, but as Evan walked back outside, he noticed something unsettling. Every single car in the lot had local plates, and every single one was dusty, like it hadn't moved in a long time. That night, Evan checked into the only motel in town, the Briar Hollow Lodge. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes and shaking hands, slid him the key without meeting his gaze. You're in room 6, she said. Check-out's at 10. Is there an early route out? Evan asked casually. My GPS is useless. Her fingers tightened on the counter. There's only one road, she said. You'll find it. But her voice said something else. It said you. One single quote to Evan woke at 3:17 a.m. to silence so complete it felt artificial. No wind, no insects, no distant engines, even his own breathing sounded too loud. He sat up and froze. Someone was standing outside his window, a figure, barely visible through the thin curtain, tall, still, close enough that Evan could see the vague outline of a head tilted slightly to the side. Watching Evan didn't move, didn't breathe. After a long moment, the figure stepped back, slowly melting into the darkness without a sound. The silence rushed back in, heavier than before. Evan didn't sleep again. At dawn, he packed quickly and drove straight for the road. Out of town, the forest swallowed him almost immediately. Trees pressed in close. The road twisted sharply, looping in ways that made no sense. After 15 minutes, Evan frowned. He passed the same broken mailbox, again and again. Panic crept in quietly. He turned the wheel hard, took turns he didn't remember seeing before. The forest didn't change. The sky above grew darker, as if clouds were forming unnaturally fast. Then he saw it. The Welcome to Briar Hollow sign, clean, freshly painted, facing him. Evan slammed the brakes. That's not possible, he whispered. He turned around and drove. 10 minutes later, same sign, same angle, same words, back in town. People watched him from doorways and windows as he passed. Not openly, just enough for him to feel it. Eyes following, heads turning away when he looked back at the diner. An old woman poured his coffee with shaking hands. You shouldn't try to leave, she murmured. Evan leaned forward. Why? Her lips trembled. Because it notices what notices. She glanced toward the window, toward the trees. This town keeps what it's given. That afternoon, Evan searched the public records at the post office. What he found made his stomach tighten. Dozens of missing persons. Reports, truck drivers, tourists, salesmen, all last seen passing through Briar Hollow. None officially missing, because, according to the town records, they never left. Worse still, some of their names appeared on recent documents. Utility bills, jury duty notices, even obituaries, dated years in the future. Evan found one name that stopped his heart. Evan Mercer, listed as a resident, move-in date 2 days from now. As the sun began to set, the town's atmosphere changed. Shadows stretched too long. The forest darkened like it was closing its eyes. Church bells rang though. Evan had never seen a church. And then the people came out, not walking, waiting, standing in doorways, on porches, at the edge of the road, all facing the same direction. The woods. Something moved between the trees. Not an animal, not human. Tall shapes slid between trunks. Their forms incomplete like silhouettes, cut from darkness itself. The air vibrated with a low sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whisper. The old gas station man appeared beside Evan without warning. "You should have listened," he said quietly. "It doesn't like being denied." Evan's voice shook. "What is it?" The man swallowed. "The reason this town exists." The trees began to move closer, and Briar Hollow, prepared to claim another name. Night didn't fall over Briar Hollow, it sank. Sky dimmed as if something massive had passed in front of the stars, swallowing their light. Evan stood frozen in the middle of the road as the forest pressed closer, the trees bending inward like spectators leaning toward an execution. The shapes between the trunks were clearer now. They weren't solid. They looked unfinished, tall, elongated figures whose edges wavered as if reality itself struggled to keep them intact. Their faces were smooth and blank, except for deep hollows where eyes should have been. And yet Evan knew they could see him. The gas station man spoke again, his voice low and urgent. "You don't run. You don't scream. And whatever you do, don't ask it to let you go." Evan swallowed. "Why?" "Because it already answered," the man said. A sound rolled through the woods, then a deep vibration that made Evan's teeth ache. The ground beneath his feet trembled, and the figures stopped moving all at once. The town lights flickered, then everything went still, too still. The gas station man stepped back, his expression hollow. "It's listening now." Evan woke on the motel bed with no memory of lying down. Morning light filtered through the curtains, warm and peaceful, so normal it felt like a cruel joke. For a moment, he wondered if the night had been a dream. Then he noticed his shoes were gone, not beside the bed, not by the door. Gone, outside. Briar Hollow was awake and moving, but something had changed. People smiled more. They waved. Children played in the street, where Evan hadn't seen a single child before. It felt staged at the diner. The old woman from the night before looked younger, healthier. Her hands were steady as she poured coffee. "You looked rested," she said pleasantly. "I didn't sleep," Evan replied. She tilted her head. "You did. It just wasn't for you." His reflection in the coffee surface made his breath hitch. He looked faded, slightly translucent around the edges, like a photograph left too long in the sun. "What's happening to me?" he whispered. The woman leaned closer. "You're being introduced." Evan learnt the truth that day, not from books or records, but from the people themselves, spoken quietly, carefully, as if the town might overhear. Briar Hollow wasn't cursed. It was fed, long before the town existed. Something lived beneath the hills, an ancient presence that needed witnesses to remain real. People gave it form by seeing it, fearing it, remembering it. In return, it gave them permanence. The townspeople didn't age the way they should. They didn't get sick. Death came rarely and only with permission. But the cost was simple. No one could leave, and newcomers weren't. Visitors, they were offerings. Each time someone tried to escape, the presence tightened its hold, reshaping roads, bending space, looping reality until resistance broke. And once someone was accepted, they were rewritten. Evan checked the town registry again. His name was no longer listed as incoming. It now read, Evan Mercer, resident active, that night. The watchers returned. This time, they stood inside the town at intersections, behind houses, at the edge of yards. The townspeople didn't look afraid. They looked reverent. The gas station man found Evan sitting on the motel steps, staring at his fading hands. "It'll finish soon," the man said softly. Evan looked up. "Finish what?" "You." Evan stood suddenly. "I won't stay." The man's eyes filled with something like pity. "We all said that." Evan ran. He ran past the diner, past the post office, past smiling faces that no longer felt human. He reached his car, fumbling for the door, and the forest was already there. The trees bent low, branches knitting together like ribs closing over a chest. The watchers emerged, surrounding him, their hollow faces inches away. The vibration returned, louder now. Inside Evan's head, a voice spoke not in words, but in certainty. "You were seen. Therefore, you remain." Evan screamed as his memories began to unravel. The road trips, the contracts, the life outside Briar Hollow, peeling away, replacing themselves with new ones. Mornings at the diner, evenings at the gas station, nights listening to the forest breathe. Weeks later, a young woman drove into Briar Hollow with a broken taillight and no signal on her phone. She stopped at the gas station, uneasy. A man stood behind the counter, thin, familiar somehow. "Evening," Evan said with a practiced smile. "Passing through." The woman nodded. "Just need directions out." Evan hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, and somewhere beneath the hills, something listened, satisfied. Story 6. The people who never slept in Ashwood. No one in Ashwood slept anymore. At first, it was treated like a coincidence. A few people complained of restlessness, then a few more. By the end of the month, the entire town was awake, eyes open. Bodies moving, minds fraying, but no one could remember the last time they had truly slept. Ashwood was small, fewer than 800 people, surrounded by miles of dead farmland and woods that locals avoided even during the day. It had one gas station, one grocery store, and a single 2-story medical clinic that had been struggling long before the insomnia began. Dr. Lena Morros arrived on a temporary assignment, expecting nothing more than a quiet rural rotation. She regretted it the first night. At 2:17 a.m., her motel room phone rang. She picked it up groggily, expecting an emergency. All she heard was breathing. Not heavy, not panicked. Just alert. "Wide awake, hello," she said. The breathing stopped. The line went dead by morning. Lena noticed something immediately wrong. The town looked active too active. People were already outside, walking, talking, working as if it were midday. No one yawned. No one moved slowly. Children played with manic energy, their laughter sharp and unfiltered at the diner. Every booth was occupied. Every eye tracked her as she entered. The waitress poured coffee she hadn't ordered. "You're new," the woman said, smiling too wide. Her eyes were bloodshot, veins spidering outward like cracks in glass. "You'll get used to it." "Used to what?" Lena asked. The woman paused, then said, "Being awake." Medical charts didn't make sense. Patients showed no signs of fatigue severe enough to match their condition. Blood work was abnormal but inconsistent, elevated cortisol, unstable melatonin levels, irregular neural activity that shouldn't have been survivable after weeks without sleep. "How long has this been going on?" Lena asked a man named Harold, who claimed he hadn't slept in 26 days. He shrugged. Hard to say. Days blur together now. Do you feel tired? Harold considered this. No, he said slowly. I feel watched. The first death happened on her third night. A teenage boy collapsed in the street, screaming. By the time Lena reached him, his eyes were wide open, so wide the whites showed all around the irises. He clawed at his own face, sobbing. They're standing over me, he screamed. They won't let me close my eyes. Then he went still. Autopsy showed no trauma, no toxins, no disease. His brain, however, showed signs of prolonged hyperactivity, like it had been forced to remain conscious beyond human limits. The official cause of death was listed as acute neurological failure. The unofficial cause was fear. That night, Lena tried to sleep. She turned off the lights, closed her eyes, and immediately felt it. The sensation of being observed, not from the doorway, not from the window, from inside the room itself. She opened her eyes. Nothing was there, but she knew that if she closed them again, something would be closer. She stayed awake until dawn. So did the rest of Ashwood people. Began reporting the same dreams, which made no sense. They weren't sleeping, yet they all described the same thing. Standing in a vast black field. No sky, no ground, just endless darkness, and shapes, tall, thin figures with no faces, leaning close enough that you could feel their breath, though they had no mouths and a voice. Always the same words. Don't blink by the second week. Blinking itself became difficult. People complained their eyes burned constantly, as if reflexes were shutting down. Some taped their eyelids open at night out of panic, terrified that closing them for even a second would allow something to happen. Lena found scratch marks around patients' eyes. Self-inflicted. One man had removed his own eyelids. I needed to see them, he told her calmly. They get angry when you don't. The clinic cameras captured something impossible. At exactly 3:33 a.m. every night, shadowy figures appeared standing beside patients' beds. They didn't move, they didn't touch, they just watched. And when someone tried to sleep, just for a second the figures leaned closer. The footage corrupted itself moments later, but the timestamps remained always the same. 3:33. Lena confronted the mayor. This isn't medical, she said. This is something else. The mayor looked exhausted, but alert. Horribly alert. We didn't invite them, he said quietly. We noticed them. What does that mean? He swallowed. The first person who stopped sleeping saw something while driving at night. A shape standing in the road. He stared too long, and now they don't want us to stop looking back. That night, Lena finally broke. Her vision blurred. Her hands shook. She sat on the motel bed, eyelids twitching uncontrollably. She closed her eyes just for a second, and she was no longer in the room. She stood in the black field. The figures surrounded her so close she could feel pressure against her face. One leaned down, though it had no mouth. She heard it clearly. If you sleep, you disappear. She jolted awake, screaming. Her motel mirror cracked from top to bottom, and written in the steam on the glass were 3 words. We see you outside. The town of Ashwood was still awake, and no one was blinking anymore. By the 5th week, Ashwood stopped pretending it was alive. Shops remained open, lights stayed on, machines kept running, but the town no longer followed time. Day and night blended together into one long, feverish stretch of awareness. The clocks still ticked, but no one trusted them. Everyone knew the real timekeeper was something else. Something patient. Dr. Lena Moros had stopped checking her reflection. Her eyes were red and swollen, veins webbing across the whites. Every blink felt dangerous now, like leaning too close to a cliff edge. She wasn't alone. No one in Ashwood blinked naturally anymore. When they did, it was deliberate, fast, controlled, terrified. People walked with their heads tilted slightly upward, fighting the instinct to let their eyelids fall. Sleep had become a crime, and the punishment was disappearance. The first person to truly fall asleep didn't die. They vanished. It was a woman named Carol Finch, a librarian who had held on longer than most. One night, exhaustion finally overtook fear. Her husband watched her sit on the edge of the bed, whispering that she just needed 1 minute. He begged her to stay awake. She smiled and closed her eyes. For less than a second, the air in the room folded inward, not violently, quietly, like something exhaling. The shadow at the corner of the room stretched, deepened, and then Carol was gone. No scream, no sound, just an indentation left on the mattress. Her husband was found hours later, still staring at the empty space, eyes wide, unblinking, whispering they took her because she stopped looking. After that, the town changed its rules. People tied bells to their wrists so the sound would keep them alert. Others taped their eyelids open at night, blood trickling down their cheeks. Some took turns watching each other, shaking anyone whose eyes lingered closed for too long. The children fared the worst. They cried constantly, not from fear, but from confusion. They asked why they weren't allowed to dream anymore, why the dark felt crowded, why the corners of their rooms felt closer every night. Lena stopped letting them close their eyes during exams. She stopped letting herself feel guilt. The clinic cameras captured more than before. At 3:33 a.m., the figures no longer stood still. They moved, slowly, deliberately. They leaned closer to beds, to chairs, to the places where people struggled to stay awake. Their faceless heads tilted as if studying human limits. One recording showed a man finally losing the fight, his eyes closing for a full second. The figure nearest him bent down, and the footage ended. When Lena returned to the room, the man was gone. The chair he'd been sitting on was still warm. Lena pieced it together from fragments, half confessions, terrified ramblings, and one final journal entry left behind by the first man who'd stopped sleeping. The beings weren't feeding on dreams. They were feeding on attention. As long as they were observed, knowledged, feared, stared at, they existed fully in this world. Sleep broke that connection. Sleep meant forgetting, and forgetting meant starvation. So they made sleep impossible. Ashwood hadn't been cursed, it had been chosen. The message spread too late. Late one night, the town lost power. Every light died at once. Screams erupted as darkness swallowed the streets. Without light, without sight, people panicked. Eyes closed involuntarily. Bodies collapsed where they stood. The shadows surged by morning. Nearly a third of Ashwood was gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just empty clothes, fallen glasses, abandoned cars, and silence. Lena tried to leave that day. She drove until the road began to stretch unnaturally, looping back toward town no matter which turn she took. The radio crackled to life on its own. A whisper bled through the static. "If you stop seeing us, you will join them." She slammed the brakes. In the rearview mirror, the back seat was full of shapes. Watching weeks later, a report circulated, online quickly dismissed as mass hysteria. a tiny town in the Midwest, where residents claimed sleep was impossible, where people vanished if they closed their eyes, where hospital footage showed figures that didn't belong to this world. Authorities arrived. They found Ashwood empty, lights on, cars abandoned, meals left half-eaten, every bed untouched, no signs of violence, and no bodies. Months later, in another small town hundreds of miles away, a man driving late at night blinked too long. He saw something standing in the road, and somewhere far beyond human sight. Something noticed that it was being watched again. Ashwood was never meant to be the last. Story 7. The town that remembered you after you died. The first problem with Grinwell wasn't that people died there, it was that they didn't leave. Grinwell sat miles away from anything meaningful. One road in, one road out, surrounded by marshland that smelled like rot even in winter. The town population sign claimed 312, and according to county records, it hadn't changed in nearly 50 years, which was impossible. People died. People moved away, but Grinwell stayed the same. So did the people in it. Marcus Hale arrived to settle his father's estate. His father, Thomas Hale, had been dead for 3 months. Heart failure, official cause. Alone in his house on Briar Lane. No suspicious circumstances, except for one thing that made Marcus's stomach knot the moment he arrived. His father's porch light was on. The house looked lived. In the lawn was trimmed. The curtains were open. Fresh tire tracks marked the driveway. Marcus unlocked the door, calling out, "Dad." The air inside smelled warm, familiar, and somewhere deeper in the house, a chair creaked. "Marcus." His father's voice called. Marcus dropped his suitcase. His father stepped into the hallway, smiling, exactly as he'd looked the last time Marcus had seen him alive. Grief does strange things to the mind. That was the explanation Marcus clung to while his father hugged him, warm, solid, real, while they sat at the kitchen table, while his father poured coffee with a steady hand. "You look tired," Thomas said. "The drive always does that." Marcus's hands shook. "Dad, I buried you." Thomas chuckled softly. "You worry too much." Outside, the town church bells rang. Marcus noticed something then. They rang once, not the hour, just once. That night, Marcus walked the town. Every house was occupied. Every light on, people sat on porches, waving as he passed. They all looked familiar, not personally, but recognizably, like faces you swear you've seen before in dreams or old photographs. At the diner, the waitress froze when she saw him. Her smile faltered just for a moment. "You're not supposed to be here yet," she whispered. "What?" She straightened instantly. "What can I get you, hon?" On the wall behind her hung framed photos of the town, decades old in one of them. Marcus saw his father young, smiling, standing in front of the same diner. The date read 1979. Marcus began to notice patterns. No one locked their doors, no one talked about leaving, and no one mentioned death. When he asked the clerk at the town office how long she'd lived in she blinked rapidly. "All my life," she said. "How old are you?" She hesitated. "Old enough." The population ledger listed names, crossed out names, and then written again, same handwriting, same ink, over and over. That night, Marcus confronted his father. "You're dead," Marcus said. "I saw the body. I signed the papers." Thomas sighed and sat down heavily. "I was tired, son. Tired of what? Leaving, the lights flickered dot from outside. Marcus heard footsteps, dozens of them, slow, approaching. You died, Marcus whispered. Thomas looked up, eyes suddenly hollow. No, I stayed. Marcus ran. The road out of Grinwell stretched endlessly, marsh on both sides, fog crawling low like breath over a grave. His headlights barely cut through it. Then the radio turned on by itself. A familiar voice spoke through the static. You were remembered, Marcus. Slammed the brakes. Standing in the road were people. Hundreds of THEMMEN, women, children, all. Staring, some he recognized now, faces from photographs, obituaries, gravestones, all of them smiling. You don't get to leave. Yet, they said in unison. Marcus woke up back in his childhood. Bedroom, morning light filtered through the curtains. On the nightstand sat a framed photo. It showed Marcus standing in front of the Grinwell town. Sign. Population 313 downstairs. His father called out, "Breakfast is ready." Marcus looked at his hands. They felt heavier, more permanent. Outside the church, bell rang once. Somewhere far away, a woman received a phone call, a lawyer, informing her that her brother Marcus had died suddenly in a small town called Grinwell Heart. Failure, no foul play suspected. The town sent condolences and asked when she'd be coming to collect his things. Marcus awoke to the same sunlight, the same creaking floorboards, the same smell of coffee. But something had shifted. The edges of the room no longer seemed stable. The walls breathed faintly, like lungs exhaling, and the shadows in the corners stretched toward him, slowly, deliberately. He tried the door, locked, not by a key, not by a latch, just locked. As if the house itself had learned he wanted to leave. He called out. No answer came, not even from his father. The voice he had trusted the day before was gone, replaced by silence that pressed into his ears and throat. Stepping into the hallway, Marcus noticed the photographs on the walls had changed. Faces morphed. The same people he had seen in town, the man who ran the hardware store. The girl from the diner now appeared older, younger, blurred, their smiles wider, empty to precise. And in one photograph, himself, standing awkwardly in front of the Grinwell town sign. Date inscribed as today. He stumbled outside. The sun was higher now, unnatural in its brightness, casting no shadows. The town was awake, but not alive. Residents stood perfectly still on porches, in yards, in the middle of streets. Their eyes fixed on Marcus, unblinking, unyielding. And then they started moving, not walking, not running, but gliding. Perfectly synchronized, silently, all converging toward him. Marcus turned to run, but the road stretched infinitely. Each turn led him back to the same central square, where the church bell tower loomed impossibly tall. Its single bell rang once, then again, once for every life Grinwell had taken, once for every soul trapped in the pattern of remembrance. He ran to the church, desperate for sanctuary, for logic, for something human. The doors opened themselves. Inside, pews were filled with spectral figures, faces familiar and terrifyingly exact, townsfolk who had died years ago, decades ago, some in accidents, others from illnesses, all seated as if waiting for a sermon that would never end. At the altar stood a figure in shadow, faceless, but taller than any human, radiating an impossible cold. "You were remembered," it whispered, its voice echoing in Marcus's head. "And remembering is forever." Marcus screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the walls. Every face in the pews turned to him. They spoke in unison. "Stay, stay, stay." He tried to blink. His eyes refused. He tried to close them. They would not obey. Every instinct screamed for rest, for escape. But Grinwell had learned him. The town remembered everything. His fears, his mistakes, his desire to leave. It fed on his attention, on his resistance. And now it would never let him go. Outside, the fog rolled in, denser than ever, filling the streets, filling the town, rolling over the marshes. From the mist, more faces emerged, people he had never met but knew somehow. They joined the congregation, merging the living, the dead, and the remembered into a single, eternal presence. Marcus ran again, finding himself trapped in an endless loop of streets, doors, and houses. Every time he entered a building, he saw himself reflected in mirrors older, paler, eyes wider, smiles forced. His reflection stepped out from the glass, leaving him behind by nightfall. The Grinwell town sign read a new number. Population 314. A shadow in the shape of Marcus now stood among the residents, smiling politely at newcomers. The bell rang once more, somewhere far away. In a city dozens of miles from Grinwell, a man driving late at night blinked too long. He felt watched. He saw the fog rising from the distance, creeping along the road, silent but alive. And for a fleeting moment, he swore he saw Marcus standing there, waving politely, waiting to remember him too. Grinwell had gained another, and it would never forget. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Terrormouth.